Hello, darkness. Chapter 1. A Fresh Start. As the U-Haul rumbled down Oak Street, Ethan Carter gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. Next to him, his daughter Lily gazed out the window, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was it, a fresh start for the Carters in their new suburban neighborhood. Ethan pulled the truck into the driveway of their charming two-story house, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Well, Lil, here we are, home sweet home." He tried to sound enthusiastic, but the lingering stress of the move and his ongoing writer's block weighed heavily on his mind. Lily turned to him, her face lighting up. "It's perfect, Dad. Can we start unpacking now?" She was eager to make this house their own, to fill it with laughter and the comforting routines they'd left behind. Ethan mustered a smile. "Sure, kiddo, let's get to it." As they began unloading the truck, Ethan couldn't help but glance across the street at the imposing, windowless house that belonged to their new neighbor, Mr. Gradwell. The man's reclusive nature and the air of mystery that surrounded him had already piqued Ethan's curiosity. Later that evening, after the last box had been carried inside, Ethan and Lily sat on the porch, enjoying the cool breeze and the sound of crickets chirping. Lily leaned against her father, her eyes drawn to the dark silhouette of Mr. Gradwell's house. "Dad, what do you think Mr. Gradwell is like?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan chuckled, ruffling Lily's hair. "I'm not sure, kiddo, but I have a feeling we're about to find out." He couldn't shake the feeling that this new neighborhood held secrets waiting to be uncovered. As the Carters settled in for their first night in their new home, Ethan found himself unable to sleep, his mind racing with questions about their enigmatic neighbor. Little did he know, the darkness that lurked within Mr. Gradwell's house was about to cast a long shadow over their lives. Chapter 2. A Friendly Gesture. The next morning, Ethan and Lily were unpacking boxes in the living room when a gentle knock came at the front door. Ethan opened it to find a smiling, middle-aged woman holding a plate of freshly baked cookies. "Hello there, I'm Mrs. Davies, your neighbor from down the street. Welcome to the neighborhood." She held out the plate, her eyes crinkling with warmth. Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Oh, how kind of you, please. Come in, I'm Ethan, and this is my daughter, Lily." He gestured to Lily, who had bounded over to greet their new neighbor. "It's so nice to meet you both," Mrs. Davies said, stepping inside and surveying the half-unpacked boxes. "I just wanted to stop by and say hello. I know how overwhelming it can be to move to a new place, so I thought a little homemade treat might help make you feel more at home." Lily eagerly accepted the plate of cookies, her eyes lighting up. "Thank you, Mrs. Davies. These look delicious." She took a bite, humming with delight. Ethan chuckled. She hasn't had a home-cooked meal in days, so this is a welcome sight. He turned to Mrs. Davies, his expression softening. "We really appreciate your kindness. It's been a bit of an adjustment, but Lily and I are excited to start this new chapter." Mrs. Davies nodded understandingly. "Well, if there's anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask. I've lived on this street for over 20 years, so I know it like the back of my hand." As they chatted, Ethan couldn't help but glance out the window, his gaze drifting to the looming presence of Mr. Gradwell's house. Mrs. Davies followed his line of sight and let out a soft sigh. "Ah, yes, Mr. Gradwell. He's quite the mystery around these parts, isn't he?" She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "There've been whispers about him for years, strange things happening in that house of his." Ethan's curiosity was piqued. "Whispers like what?" Mrs. Davies shook her head. Oh, you know how small towns can be, rumors and gossip, mostly. But there was that incident a few years back with a missing child. Poor Mr. Gradwell, he was quite shaken by it all. Lily's eyes widened, and Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. A missing child, what happened? Mrs. Davies pursed her lips. Well, I don't like to speculate, but the authorities were never able to find the child. And Mr. Gradwell, he's been a recluse ever since, keeps to himself, hardly ever leaves that house of his. She glanced at the ominous structure across the street and shuddered. Ethan exchanged a troubled look with Lily. This was certainly going to be an interesting neighborhood to call home. Chapter 3: Curious Encounters. Over the next few days, Ethan and Lily began to settle into their new routine. Lily had started attending the local elementary school, where she quickly made friends and impressed her teacher, Miss Jones, with her bright and inquisitive nature. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself consumed by the mystery of their neighbor, Mr. Gradwell. As he struggled to overcome his persistent writer's block, his curiosity about the reclusive man only seemed to grow. One evening, Ethan was working in his study when a flicker of movement outside caught his eye. He peered out the window and saw a peculiar sight as strange lights flickering in the basement of Mr. Gradwell's house. Ethan frowned, leaning closer to get a better look. Just then, Lily poked her head into the room. "Dad, what are you doing?" Ethan startled, turning to face his daughter. Oh, nothing, Lil, just looking out the window." He hesitated, then decided to share his observation. "I thought I saw some strange lights coming from Mr. Gradwell's place. It was probably nothing, but it caught my eye." Lily's face lit up with excitement. "Oh, do you think he's doing something secret down there?" She rushed to the window, peering out intently. Ethan chuckled, ruffling her hair. "I'm not sure, honey, but it did seem a bit odd." He glanced back out the window, but the lights had disappeared. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. Lily pouted. "Oh, I was hoping for something more exciting." She turned to her father, her expression earnest. "Do you think we could maybe try talking to Mr. Gradwell? I'd love to meet his dog." Ethan paused, considering the idea. "Well, I suppose it couldn't hurt to introduce ourselves, though I'm not sure Mr. Gradwell is the friendly type." He sighed, thinking of the ominous aura surrounding the man's house. The next day, Ethan and Lily ventured across the street, Lily clutching a bag of dog treats. Ethan approached the front door and knocked firmly, his heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. After a long moment, the door creaked open, revealing a stern-faced Mr. Gradwell. "Yes," he growled, his eyes narrowing behind his thick-rimmed glasses. Ethan cleared his throat. Hello, Mr. Gradwell. I'm your new neighbor, Ethan Carter, and this is my daughter, Lily." He gestured to Lily, who offered the man a tentative smile. Mr. Gradwell's expression remained impassive. "What do you want?" Lily stepped forward, holding out the bag of treats. "We just wanted to say hello and introduce ourselves. I brought some treats for your dog, if that's okay." For a moment, Mr. Gradwell's gaze softened, and Ethan could have sworn he saw a flicker of emotion cross the man's face. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "The dog doesn't need treats," Mr. Gradwell said gruffly, before slamming the door in their faces. Ethan and Lily exchanged a bewildered look. "Well, that went well," Ethan muttered, his curiosity about their neighbor only growing stronger. Chapter 4: A Disturbing Discovery. As the days passed, Ethan found himself increasingly obsessed with the mystery surrounding Mr. Gradwell. He would often catch himself staring out the window, watching for any sign of activity in the imposing house across the street. One afternoon, as Lily was playing in the neighborhood park, Ethan decided to take a closer look at the attic of their own home. He climbed the creaky stairs, his fingers trailing along the dusty beams as he surveyed the cluttered space. Suddenly, his foot caught on something, and he stumbled, nearly losing his balance. Steadying himself, Ethan knelt down and examined the object he had tripped over, a strange, makeshift contraption fashioned from old curtains and bits of string. Ethan's brow furrowed as he gently picked it up, turning it over in his hands. What on earth? The device appeared to be some sort of miniature hot air balloon, complete with a small basket and a curious-looking mechanism. Intrigued, Ethan carried the contraption over to a nearby window, peering out at Mr. Gradwell's house. As he studied the device, a sense of unease crept up his spine. Could this bizarre object be connected to the reclusive neighbor in some way? Ethan's mind raced with questions. Where had this come from? Why was it hidden in his attic? And what did it have to do with Mr. Gradwell and the mystery that surrounded him? Clutching the strange device, Ethan descended the stairs, his thoughts swirling. He needed to get to the bottom of this, but he knew he had to be careful. There was no telling what secrets Mr. Gradwell might be hiding. As Ethan entered the living room, Lily bounded in, her face flushed from playing. "Dad, you'll never guess what happened," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. Ethan forced a smile, quickly hiding the balloon contraption behind his back. "What is it, sweetie?" "I met Mr. Gradwell's dog," Lily said, bouncing on the balls of her feet. "I was playing in the park, and the dog came over to me. He seemed a little scared at first, but I gave him some of the treats I had, and he let me pet him." Ethan's eyes widened, his grip tightening on the strange device. You met Mr. Gradwell's dog?" He couldn't help but feel a twinge of concern, despite Lily's evident joy. Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, I think he likes me. Maybe we can try talking to Mr. Gradwell again, and he'll let me play with the dog some more." Ethan sighed, his mind racing. "We'll see, Lil. For now, why don't you go wash up for dinner?" As Lily skipped off, Ethan glanced back down at the balloon contraption, his unease growing. What was the meaning of this mysterious device, and how did it connect to the secrets lurking within Mr. Gradwell's house? Chapter 5. A Cryptic Clue. That night, as Lily slept soundly in her bed, Ethan found himself back in the attic, the strange balloon contraption sitting on his desk. He had spent hours poring over the device, searching for any clues that might shed light on its origin and purpose. Ethan ran his fingers along the faded fabric of the balloon, his brow furrowed in concentration. There had to be some connection between this mysterious object and the unsettling things he had witnessed in Mr. Gradwell's house. But what could it be? Suddenly, his eyes landed on a small piece of paper tucked into the basket. Carefully, he unfolded it, and his breath caught in his throat. Scrawled in a shaky hand were the words, "The night sky will show the truth, you must see." Ethan stared at the cryptic message, his mind racing. What did it mean? What truth was it referring to, and how was it connected to the night sky? He glanced back at the balloon, a sense of dread settling in the pit of his stomach. Was this some kind of clue left behind by the previous owner? Or was it a warning, a message from a past tragedy? Ethan's thoughts turned to Lily, and a protective instinct flared within him. He couldn't involve his daughter in whatever dark secrets Mr. Gradwell's house held. but the curiosity that had plagued him since moving in refused to be ignored. Clutching the note, Ethan made his way back downstairs, his mind whirling with possibilities. He needed to find a way to uncover the truth without putting Lily in harm's way. But how could he do that when the very existence of this strange device suggested that something sinister was afoot? As he settled into his chair, Ethan's gaze drifted to the imposing silhouette of Mr. Gradwell's house, looming across the street. The flickering lights he had witnessed in the basement flooded his mind, and he shuddered. Whatever was happening in that house, Ethan knew he couldn't ignore it. The safety of his family depended on him getting to the bottom of this mystery. But as he stared at the cryptic note, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to descend into a darkness he might never escape. Chapter 6: A Stormy Encounter. The following days were filled with a sense of unease for Ethan. He found himself constantly glancing out the window, his eyes drawn to the ominous presence of Mr. Gradwell's house. The mysterious balloon contraption and the cryptic note weighed heavily on his mind, and he struggled to focus on his writing. One particularly stormy night, Ethan was hunched over his desk, staring at a blank page, when a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows. He looked up, his heart pounding, and that's when he saw it. The balloon in the attic was glowing, its fabric rippling as if it were alive. Ethan jumped to his feet, his mind racing. Could the note he had found have been some kind of warning? Without a moment's hesitation, he raced up the stairs, his footsteps echoing through the house. As he reached the attic, Ethan watched in stunned disbelief as the balloon slowly lifted off the ground, its basket swaying precariously. He moved to grab it, but a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the room, and the device surged forward, pulling him along with it. Ethan let out a startled cry as he was yanked through the open attic window, the wind howling in his ears. Somehow, the balloon had gained enough lift to carry him across the street, directly towards the looming silhouette of Mr. Gradwell's house. Panic seized Ethan as he realized where the balloon was headed. He grasped the basket, his fingers slipping on the wet fabric, and he fought to regain control. But the wind seemed to have a mind of its own, guiding the device straight towards an open window in Mr. Gradwell's house. With a sickening lurch, Ethan felt himself plummeting through the window, crashing into a dimly lit room. He hit the floor hard, the breath knocked out of him, and the balloon came crashing down, its fabric settling around him like a shroud. As Ethan lay there, dazed and disoriented, a door creaked open, and the imposing figure of Mr. Gradwell appeared, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What are you doing in my house?" the older man growled, his voice like gravel. Ethan's heart raced, and he knew he was in a world of trouble. He had somehow stumbled into the very heart of the mystery he had been so desperately trying to unravel. And now, face to face with the reclusive neighbor, he had no idea what would happen next. Chapter 7: The Chase. Ethan's mind raced as he struggled to his feet, the torn balloon fabric clinging to his clothes. He held up his hands in a gesture of surrender, his eyes darting around the dimly lit room. "I'm sorry, Mr. Gradwell, I don't know how I ended up here," Ethan stammered, his voice betraying his growing fear. Mr. Gradwell's expression darkened, and he took a step forward, his bony fingers curling into fists. "You have no business being in my house. Get out now." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he glimpsed a flash of something dark and dangerous in the older man's eyes. He knew he needed to tread carefully, but the overwhelming urge to uncover the truth about this enigmatic neighbor was too strong to ignore. "Please, Mr. Gradwell, I can explain," Ethan pleaded, taking a cautious step forward. I found this strange balloon in my attic, and it just seemed to activate on its own during the storm. I didn't mean to intrude, I swear." Mr. Gradwell's expression remained impassive, but Ethan could see the muscles in his jaw tensing. "That's not your concern. You need to leave now." Sensing the growing hostility, Ethan knew he had to act quickly. His gaze darted around the room, taking in the strange inventions and surveillance equipment that lined the walls. Whatever was happening in this house, it was clear that Mr. Gradwell was hiding something. "Mr. Gradwell, please," Ethan pressed, his voice growing more insistent. "I think there's more going on here than you're letting on. I just want to understand what's happening." The older man's eyes narrowed, and in one swift motion, he lunged forward, his hands grasping for Ethan's throat. Ethan reacted instinctively, dodging the attack and darting towards the door. A chase ensued, with Ethan weaving through the labyrinthine rooms of Mr. Gradwell's house, his heart pounding in his ears. He could hear the older man's heavy footsteps behind him, the sound of his ragged breathing growing closer with each passing second. Desperate, Ethan spotted a narrow staircase leading down to what he assumed was the basement. Without hesitation, he plunged down the steps, his foot catching on the uneven surface and sending him tumbling. He hit the ground hard, pain lancing through his leg, but he forced himself to keep moving. As Ethan reached the bottom of the stairs, he found himself in a dimly lit, cavernous room. Shelves and workbenches lined the walls, filled with an assortment of bizarre gadgets and machinery. In the far corner, a strange flickering light caught his eye, and Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Gritting his teeth against the pain in his leg, Ethan pushed forward, determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Chapter 8. Unsettling Discoveries. Ethan's heart raced as he limped through the dimly lit basement, his eyes darting around the room. Shelves lined the walls, filled with a strange assortment of gadgets and machinery, but what truly unsettled him was the flickering light in the far corner. Ignoring the throbbing pain in his injured leg, Ethan made his way towards the light, his curiosity overriding his fear. As he drew closer, the sounds of his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space, he realized the light was coming from a series of old monitors, their screens flickering with grainy footage. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he peered closer, his hands trembling. The images on the screens were disturbing: a child's laughter, the sound of a swing creaking, the muffled cries of a young voice. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Just then, a noise behind him startled Ethan, and he whirled around to see Mr. Gradwell standing in the doorway, his face a mask of fury. "You shouldn't be down here," the older man growled, his eyes narrowing as he took in Ethan's betrayed expression. Ethan's mind was in a whirlwind, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. "Mr. Gradwell, what is all of this? What are you doing?" The older man's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might attack again. But instead, Mr. Gradwell let out a weary sigh, his shoulders slumping. "It's none of your concern," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You need to leave before I do something I might regret." Ethan stood his ground, his mind racing. "I can't just leave, not after what I've seen. There's something going on here. Something terrible. Please, Mr. Gradwell, tell me the truth." The older man's expression hardened, and Ethan knew he was pushing his luck. But he couldn't ignore the pit of dread in his stomach, the feeling that there was a dark, sinister secret lurking within these walls. Just as Mr. Gradwell opened his mouth to speak, a sudden crash from upstairs startled them both. Ethan watched as the older man's face paled, his eyes widening with a mix of fear and panic. "No," Mr. Gradwell breathed, before turning and running back up the stairs, his footsteps echoing through the room. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before following, his curiosity and concern overriding his better judgment. Whatever was happening, he knew he couldn't leave now, not when he was so close to uncovering the truth. As he limped up the stairs, Ethan could only imagine the horrors that might await him in the darkness of Mr. Gradwell's house. Chapter 9. A Narrow Escape. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he followed Mr. Gradwell up the stairs, his injured leg throbbing with every step. The older man moved with surprising agility, his long strides carrying him swiftly through the labyrinthine rooms. Ethan struggled to keep up, his mind racing with questions and a growing sense of dread. What had he stumbled upon in the basement? And what was happening now that had so clearly unsettled Mr. Gradwell? As Ethan reached the top of the stairs, he heard a loud crash, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Steeling himself, he pushed forward, rounding a corner and finding himself in a dimly lit hallway. There, in the distance, he could see Mr. Gradwell standing in an open doorway, his body silhouetted against the darkness beyond. Ethan crept closer, his senses on high alert, and that's when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone else moving, their footsteps echoing through the house. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he realized that Mr. Gradwell was not alone. Carefully, he inched forward, peering into the room, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A figure, shrouded in shadow, was climbing out of a shattered window, their movements frantic and hurried. Ethan watched, his heart pounding, as Mr. Gradwell lunged forward, reaching out in a desperate attempt to stop the intruder. But the figure was too quick, slipping through the window and disappearing into the night. Mr. Gradwell let out a guttural cry of frustration, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. Ethan knew he should turn and flee to put as much distance between himself and this nightmare as possible. But something rooted him to the spot, a morbid curiosity that refused to be extinguished. Suddenly, Mr. Gradwell's head snapped in Ethan's direction, his eyes narrowing as he caught sight of the younger man. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine, and he knew he needed to act quickly. Turning, he hobbled as fast as his injured leg would allow, his mind racing. He had to get out of this house, to escape the darkness that seemed to permeate every corner. But as he reached the top of the stairs, a searing pain shot through his leg, and he stumbled, his vision blurring. Ethan heard the thunderous sound of footsteps behind him, and he knew that Mr. Gradwell was in pursuit. With a desperate burst of adrenaline, he surged forward, tumbling down the stairs and crashing through the front door, spilling out onto the street. He landed hard on the pavement, his injured leg screaming in protest. Glancing back, he caught a glimpse of Mr. Gradwell's face, twisted with rage, before the door slammed shut, cutting off the older man's advance. Ethan lay there, panting heavily, his heart hammering in his chest. He had somehow managed to escape the house of horrors, but at what cost? And what dark secrets had he nearly uncovered? As the rain began to fall, Ethan knew that he could no longer ignore the mystery that had taken hold of his new neighborhood. He had to find out the truth, no matter how dangerous the path ahead might be. Chapter 10. Lily's Bravery. Ethan lay on the pavement, the rain pounding against his bruised and battered body, his mind reeling from the terrifying encounter in Mr. Gradwell's house. He knew he needed to get back on his feet, to call for help, but the pain in his leg was nearly crippling. Just then, The sound of a familiar voice reached his ears, and Ethan lifted his head to see Lily running towards him, her face etched with worry. "Dad, oh my gosh, what happened?" Lily dropped to her knees beside him, her small hands gently touching his injured leg. Ethan winced, biting back a groan. "Lily, what are you doing out here? It's not safe." He tried to push himself up, but the sharp pain in his leg made him collapse back to the ground. Lily's eyes were wide with fear, but her voice was steady as she spoke. "I heard a noise and saw you running out of Mr. Gradwell's house. I was worried about you." She glanced up at the imposing structure, her expression hardening. "What happened in there, Dad?" Ethan hesitated, not wanting to frighten his daughter, but he knew he couldn't hide the truth from her. I went into Mr. Gradwell's house, though, and I saw some things that I don't think I was supposed to see." He let out a shaky breath. "I had to get out of there, and I ended up hurting my leg in the process." Lily's brow furrowed, and Ethan could see the wheels turning in her mind. "Is Mr. Gradwell, is he a bad man?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan sighed, reaching out to give her hand a gentle squeeze. "I'm not sure, honey, but I think there's a lot more going on in that house than we know." He winced again as a wave of pain shot through his leg. "I need to get inside and call for help. Can you go get my phone for me?" Lily nodded, her expression determined. "Okay, Dad, I'll be right back." She gave him a quick hug before scurrying back towards the house, her small frame disappearing into the shadows. Ethan watched her go, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and fear. He knew he shouldn't have involved Lily in this mess, but he also couldn't ignore the bravery and resilience she had shown in the face of such uncertainty. As Lily returned with his phone, Ethan quickly dialed 911, his hands shaking. He couldn't shake the unsettling images from the basement, the sound of the child's laughter echoing in his mind. Whatever was happening in Mr. Gradwell's house, he knew he couldn't ignore it, not when the safety of his own daughter was at stake. Chapter 11. Confined and Confined. The next few days were a blur for Ethan as he recovered from his injuries, confined to a wheelchair while his leg slowly mended. The police had responded to his 911 call, questioning him about the incident at Mr. Gradwell's house, but Ethan had been forced to admit that he had few concrete answers to offer. Despite his best efforts, the authorities had found no evidence of wrongdoing within Mr. Gradwell's home, and the reclusive neighbor had vanished, seemingly retreating deeper into the shadows. Ethan's persistent queries were met with frustrating dead ends, leaving him feeling increasingly powerless and trapped. As Ethan sat in his study, his leg propped up on a cushion, Lily entered the room, a concerned expression on her face. "Dad, are you okay? You've been in here all day?" Ethan offered his daughter a weary smile. "I'm fine, Lil, just trying to figure out our next move." He gestured to the documents and notes scattered across his desk, a frown creasing his brow. Lily moved closer, her eyes scanning the pages. "Is this about Mr. Gradwell and what happened in his house?" She bit her lip, a hint of fear in her voice. Ethan let out a heavy sigh. "I wish I had more answers, honey, but the truth is, I'm as confused as you are." He reached out, gently squeezing her hand. "I need your help, Lily. I can't go back to that house. Not with this leg, but I need to find out what's going on." Lily's eyes widened, and Ethan could see the apprehension written on her face. "You want me to go back there, but Dad, it's dangerous. What if Mr. Gradwell tries to hurt me?" Ethan shook his head. "I won't let that happen, Lily, I promise. But I need you to be brave for me, just like you were the other night." I need you to follow that dog of his, the one you met in the park. Maybe it can lead you to something that can help us understand what's happening." Lily's brow furrowed, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might refuse. But then, her expression hardened, and she nodded resolutely. "Okay, Dad, I'll do it for you." Ethan felt a surge of pride and guilt, knowing that he was asking so much of his young daughter. But as he watched Lily leave the room, determination burning in her eyes, he couldn't help but believe that she might be the key to unraveling the mystery that had taken hold of their lives. Leaning back in his wheelchair, Ethan's gaze drifted to the window, where he could see the looming presence of Mr. Gradwell's house. Whatever was hidden within those walls, he was more determined than ever to bring it to light, no matter the cost. Chapter 12. Lily's Mission. Lily steeled herself as she approached the imposing gates of Mr. Gradwell's house, the weight of her father's request heavy on her shoulders. She had promised to be brave, to follow the reclusive man's dog in the hopes of uncovering some clue that might help Ethan unravel the mystery. But as she stood there, her small hands gripping the iron bars, a sense of unease crept up her spine. What if Mr. Gradwell caught her snooping around his property? What if the dog didn't cooperate, or worse, led her into some unspeakable danger? Lily took a deep breath, pushing those fears aside. Her father was counting on her, and she wasn't about to let him down. Squaring her shoulders, she carefully slipped through the gate, her eyes scanning the overgrown yard for any sign of the elusive dog. As she made her way towards the house, Lily couldn't help but feel a chill. The ominous structure seemed to loom over her, its dark windows like hollowed eyes watching her every move. She quickened her pace, keeping close to the hedges and bushes, hoping to avoid detection. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught her eye, and Lily froze, her heart pounding. There, at the edge of the yard, was the dog, a scruffy, nervous-looking creature that seemed to be eyeing her warily. Slowly, Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a few dog treats, holding them out as an offering. "Hey there, boy," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." The dog hesitated for a moment, its gaze darting back towards the house, before cautiously approaching Lily. She held her breath, watching as the dog sniffed the treats, then gently took them from her hand, its tail wagging tentatively. Lily felt a surge of relief, and she reached out to give the dog a gentle pat on the head. "Good boy," she murmured, her lips curving into a small smile. "I need your help. Can you show me what's going on in this place?" The dog's ears perked up, and Lily took that as a sign of understanding. Slowly, she began to follow the animal as it led her deeper into the yard, her senses on high alert for any sign of danger. As they neared the house, Lily couldn't help but feel a growing sense of trepidation. What secrets were hidden within those walls, and would she be brave enough to uncover them? Chapter 13. A Dangerous Path. Lily's heart raced as she followed the dog deeper into Mr. Gradwell's overgrown yard, the imposing house looming ever closer. She kept a tight grip on the dog's collar, silently urging him onward, her eyes darting back and forth for any sign of movement or danger. Suddenly, the dog came to a halt, letting out a low, nervous whine. Lily froze, her gaze following the dog's line of sight, and her breath caught in her throat. Partially hidden by a thicket of bushes was a small, inconspicuous door, a hidden entrance to the house. Lily's mind raced as she considered her next move. Should she attempt to open the door and see where it led? Or should she turn back, content with the information she had gathered, and report her findings to her father? The dog let out another whine, his eyes pleading, and Lily knew she couldn't abandon him. Gripping the collar tighter, she slowly approached the hidden door, her fingers gently tracing the worn wooden frame. After a moment's hesitation, she gave the handle a gentle push, and to her surprise it yielded, swinging open to reveal a dark, narrow passage. Lily peered inside, her heart pounding. The passageway was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of must and decay. She glanced down at the dog, who seemed to be urging her forward, his tail wagging tentatively. "Okay, boy," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "Let's see what's down there." Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the passage, the dog at her heels. As she moved forward, her eyes slowly adjusting to the gloom, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the very walls of the house were closing in around her. The passage twisted and turned, and Lily found herself struggling to keep her bearings. She reached out a hand, trailing it along the rough stone walls, searching for any signs of an exit or a way back. Just when she was about to turn back, she heard a sound, a faint, echoing creak that sent a shiver down her spine. Lily froze, her eyes straining to pierce the darkness, and that's when she saw it, a glimmer of light, like a distant flame, flickering in the distance. Steeling her nerves, Lily pressed onward, the dog by her side, determined to uncover the secrets that lay at the heart of Mr. Gradwell's mysterious house. Chapter 14. Navigating the Labyrinth. Lily's footsteps echoed in the dimly lit passage as she followed the flickering light, her heart pounding in her chest. The dog at her side seemed uneasy, his ears perked and his body tense, as if sensing the danger that lurked ahead. As Lily moved forward, the passage began to widen, the walls giving way to a series of interconnected rooms. She paused, her gaze sweeping the space, taking in the strange and unsettling objects that lined the shelves, odd gadgets, dusty books, and what appeared to be old surveillance equipment. The dog let out a low growl, his hackles raised, and Lily felt a chill run down her spine. "Easy, boy," she whispered, reaching out to gently stroke his fur. "We need to be very quiet, okay?" Lily continued to navigate the maze-like rooms, her senses on high alert. The further she ventured, the more disturbing the contents of the house became. She spotted strange, half-finished inventions, their purpose unclear, and the flickering lights she had seen from the outside now seemed to be emanating from a series of old monitors, their screens filled with static and distorted images. As Lily crept closer, she felt her breath catch in her throat. The images on the screens were unsettling, a child's laughter, a swinging playground, and what sounded like muffled cries. Lily's mind raced, memories of her father's hushed conversations with the police flooding back to her. "This must be what Dad was talking about," she murmured, her fingers tracing the edge of one of the monitors. "Whatever happened here, Mr. Gradwell was clearly hiding something." The dog let out a soft whine, and Lily turned to see him pawing at a door in the corner of the room. She hesitated for a moment, then approached the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. With a deep breath, Lily gently pushed the door open, peering into the dimly lit space beyond. What she saw made her heart skip a beat, a sprawling, makeshift laboratory, filled with strange devices and half-finished experiments. Lily's eyes widened as she took in the scene, her mind struggling to make sense of it all. "What is this place?" she whispered, her gaze drawn to a large, looming structure in the center of the room. Just then, a sudden sound from behind made her whirl around, her heart racing. There, in the doorway, stood the imposing figure of Mr. Gradwell, his eyes narrowed with fury. "What are you doing in my house?" the older man growled, his voice low and menacing. Lily felt a surge of panic, but she refused to back down, her determination fueled by the need to uncover the truth. I want to know what happened, Mr. Gradwell. What are you hiding?" For a moment, the older man's expression shifted, a flicker of something akin to pain crossing his features. But as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, replaced by a mask of anger. "You shouldn't be here," Mr. Gradwell said, his voice trembling. "You need to leave now." Lily held her ground, her eyes darting around the room, searching for a way out. She knew she couldn't outrun the older man, not with his imposing size and strength. But she also couldn't ignore the haunting images she had seen, the unanswered questions that burned in her mind. As the seconds ticked by, Lily realized that she had no choice but to confront Mr. Gradwell, no matter the consequences. She had to find out the truth, even if it meant risking everything. Chapter 15. A Desperate Gambit. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she stared up at Mr. Gradwell, the older man's imposing figure blocking the only exit from the sprawling laboratory. She knew she was in grave danger, but the need to uncover the truth about this mysterious house was too strong to ignore. Mustering her courage, Lily took a step forward, her eyes narrowing with determination. "Mr. Gradwell, please. I just want to understand what's going on here. What happened to that missing child?" The older man's expression darkened, and Lily saw a flash of anguish cross his features. "That's none of your concern," he growled, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. Lily refused to back down, even as her legs trembled beneath her. "But it is my concern, Mr. Gradwell. My dad was in your house, and he saw things that scared him. I need to know the truth." For a moment, Lily thought she saw a glimmer of resignation in the older man's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a renewed anger. "You need to leave now." He took a step forward, his movements menacing. Sensing the danger, the dog at Lily's side let out a fearsome growl, his hackles raised. Lily reached out, placing a hand on the dog's back, her eyes pleading. "Please, Mr. Gradwell, I won't tell anyone. I promise. I need to understand." Mr. Gradwell paused, his gaze shifting between Lily and the dog, and Lily dared to hope that she might have reached him. But then his expression hardened, and he surged forward, his hands reaching for her. Lily reacted on instinct, darting to the side and bolting towards the exit. The dog ran alongside her, his paws pounding against the hard floor as they navigated the maze of rooms. Lily could hear Mr. Gradwell's heavy footsteps behind them, his ragged breathing echoing through the space. As she rounded a corner, Lily spotted a narrow staircase leading up, and without hesitation she began to climb, her small legs burning with the effort. The dog followed closely, his nails clicking against the wooden steps. Lily could feel Mr. Gradwell closing in, the sound of his pursuit relentless. She pushed herself harder, her heart racing, and as she reached the top of the stairs, she found herself in a familiar place, the attic of her own home. Glancing around, Lily spotted the hidden entrance to the secret passage, the one that had led her to this nightmare in the first place. Without a moment's pause, she hurled herself through the opening, the dog at her heels, and began to crawl back towards the safety of her own house. As she moved, she could hear the sound of Mr. Gradwell's enraged shouts, his footsteps thundering above her. Lily's breath caught in her throat, and she knew that she had to keep going, no matter what. Her father was counting on her, and she refused to let him down. With renewed determination, Lily pressed forward, her only thought to escape the darkness that had enveloped Mr. Gradwell's house, and returned to the safety of her own home. Chapter 16. Ethan's Desperate Plan. Ethan sat in his wheelchair, his injured leg propped up on a cushion, his gaze locked on the clock. Lily had been gone for hours, and he could feel the anxiety gnawing at his nerves. What if something had happened to her? What if Mr. Gradwell had discovered her snooping and... He shook his head, refusing to entertain those dark thoughts. Lily was smart, and she had the dog to protect her. She would be okay. She had to be. Suddenly, the sound of a commotion outside caught Ethan's attention, and he wheeled himself over to the window, peering out into the darkness. His breath caught in his throat as he saw a small figure darting across the yard, a scruffy dog at its heels. "Lily!" Ethan cried, his heart pounding. He watched in horror as his daughter scrambled towards the house, her face etched with fear. Without a moment's hesitation, he flung the window open and called out to her. "Lily, come on, get inside quickly." Lily didn't hesitate, racing across the yard and bursting through the front door, the dog hot on her heels. Ethan pulled her into a tight embrace, relief washing over him. "Dad, we have to get out of here," Lily panted, her eyes wild. "Mr. Gradwell, he found me in his house, and now he's coming." Ethan's expression darkened, and he tightened his grip on his daughter. "It's okay, Lily, you're safe now, but we can't stay here." He glanced around the room, his mind racing. Suddenly, his gaze landed on the strange balloon contraption he had discovered in the attic, and an idea began to form. "Lily, listen to me. I need you to go get that balloon, the one from the attic. Can you do that for me?" Lily's brow furrowed, but she nodded, quickly rushing up the stairs. Ethan turned his attention to the dog, who was pacing nervously near the front door. "You too," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I need your help, boy." The dog seemed to sense the urgency in Ethan's tone, and he moved closer, his eyes fixed on the man in the wheelchair. Ethan took a deep breath, his mind whirling with possibilities. "Okay, here's what we're going to do." As Lily returned with the balloon, Ethan knew that their only chance of escaping Mr. Gradwell's wrath rested on this desperate gambit. He only hoped that it would be enough to keep them all safe. Chapter 17. A Perilous Flight. Ethan's heart raced as he watched Lily carry the strange balloon contraption down the stairs, her face etched with a mixture of fear and determination. He knew that what he was about to attempt was risky, but it was their only chance of escaping Mr. Gradwell's clutches. "Quickly, Lily, set it down here," Ethan said, gesturing to the open space in the living room. Lily did as he instructed, her hands trembling slightly. Ethan turned his attention to the dog, who was pacing nervously near the front door. "Okay, boy, it's time to earn your keep. I need you to lead Mr. Gradwell away from the house. Do you understand?" The dog let out a low, rumbling bark, as if acknowledging Ethan's request. Without hesitation, the dog bounded towards the door, his claws scratching against the wood as he pushed it open and darted outside. Ethan watched anxiously, his grip tightening on the arms of his wheelchair. Moments later, the sound of thundering footsteps echoed from outside, and Ethan knew that Mr. Gradwell had taken the bait. "All right, Lily, now it's your turn," Ethan said, his voice low and urgent. "I need you to activate the balloon, just like you saw in the attic. Can you do that for me?" Lily's eyes widened, and for a moment, Ethan worried that she might refuse. But then, her expression hardened with determination, and she nodded. Ethan watched as Lily approached the balloon, her small hands tracing the faded fabric. Suddenly, the device began to hum to life, its basket slowly lifting off the ground. "Get in, Lily," Ethan called out, gesturing for her to climb aboard. "Hurry, before Mr. Gradwell comes back." Lily hesitated for the briefest of moments, her gaze flickering between Ethan and the balloon. Then, with a deep breath, she scrambled into the basket, her fingers gripping the edges tightly. Ethan felt a surge of pride and fear as he watched his daughter take flight, the balloon rising rapidly towards the night sky. He knew that he was risking everything, that he was placing Lily's life in jeopardy, but he also knew that it was their only chance of escape. As the balloon disappeared into the darkness, Ethan wheeled himself towards the front door, his heart pounding. He had to lead Mr. Gradwell away, to give Lily a chance to get to safety. Whatever happened to him, he couldn't let the reclusive neighbor catch up to his daughter. Steeling his nerves, Ethan wheeled himself out into the night, praying that his gamble would pay off. Chapter 18. A Tragic Revelation. Lily clung to the edges of the balloon basket, her eyes wide with fear as she watched the world below grow smaller and smaller. The night air whipped through her hair, and she shivered, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. As the balloon rose higher, Lily couldn't help but glance back towards the house, her heart sinking as she saw her father emerge, wheeling himself out into the darkness. Her throat tightened with worry, and she knew she had to find a way to help him, to get him to safety. Just then, a movement in the distance caught her eye, and Lily felt a chill run down her spine. There, emerging from the shadows, was the imposing figure of Mr. Gradwell, his face twisted with rage. Lily watched in horror as the older man gave chase, his long strides quickly closing the distance between him and Ethan. She wanted to call out, to warn her father, but the words caught in her throat, her terror paralyzing her. As the balloon drifted higher, Lily could only watch, helpless, as the terrifying scene unfolded below. She saw her father turn his wheelchair, facing Mr. Gradwell head-on, and for a moment she dared to hope that he might somehow prevail. But then, a sound reached Lily's ears, a sound that made her heart skip a beat. It was the faint echo of a child's laughter, followed by a muffled cry, the very same sounds she had heard in the basement, the haunting recordings that had fueled her determination to uncover the truth. Lily's eyes widened, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. Mr. Gradwell's obsession, the hidden surveillance equipment, the strange inventions, it all made sense now. And the realization that struck her was one that left her trembling with a mix of horror and pity. "Oh, Mr. Gradwell," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rush of the wind. "What happened to you?" As the balloon drifted higher, Lily watched helplessly as her father and Mr. Gradwell vanished from sight, the darkness swallowing them up. She knew that she had to find a way to help, to save them both, but the overwhelming sense of despair that gripped her made it hard to think clearly. Clutching the sides of the basket, Lily steeled her nerves, her determination burning brighter than ever. She would not abandon her father, no matter the cost. And somehow, she would find a way to uncover the tragic truth that had consumed Mr. Gradwell's life. With that resolve, Lily turned her gaze to the night sky, searching for any sign of the balloon's destination. She knew that in order to save her father, she had to find a way to follow the trail left by the device in the attic, the very one that had brought her into this nightmare in the first place. As the balloon drifted higher, Lily's mind raced, her fingers tracing the intricate mechanisms of the basket. She remembered the cryptic note her father had found, the one that spoke of the night sky revealing the truth. Could that be the key to unlocking this mystery? Lily's gaze was drawn to a blinking light in the distance, a faint signal that seemed to be calling out to the balloon. Without hesitation, she adjusted the controls, her fingers moving with a surprising deftness as the balloon began to drift in the direction of the signal. As she followed the faint trail, Lily couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. What would she find at the end of this journey? And more importantly, would she be able to save her father in time? The balloon sailed on, the night sky a vast and unforgiving canvas, as Lily's mind replayed the haunting images she had witnessed in Mr. Gradwell's house. The child's laughter, the muffled cries, they had been the echoes of a tragedy that had clearly consumed the reclusive man's life. Lily's heart ached for Mr. Gradwell, for the pain and anguish he must have endured all these years. She couldn't begin to imagine the weight of that burden, the guilt and the despair that must have driven him to such desperate measures. But as much as she felt for the older man, Lily's primary concern was for her father, trapped in the darkness below. She knew that she had to find him, to bring him to safety, no matter the cost. As the balloon drifted over a vast, open expanse, Lily's eyes widened at the sight of a small, deserted island in the distance. The faint signal seemed to be emanating from that remote location, and Lily knew that this was her destination. Steeling her nerves, she guided the balloon towards the island, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. Whatever awaited her there, she was determined to face it head-on, to uncover the truth, and, if possible, to save her father from the darkness that had consumed them all. Chapter 19. A Daring Rescue. The balloon touched down on the desolate island with a gentle thud, and Lily peered over the edge of the basket, her eyes scanning the barren landscape. There, in the distance, she could see a small, dilapidated shack, the faint signal she had been following seemingly emanating from within. Lily took a deep, steadying breath, then carefully climbed out of the balloon, her feet sinking into the soft sand. The dog, who had remained by her side throughout the journey, let out a low, nervous whine, his gaze fixed on the shack. "It's okay, boy," Lily murmured, reaching out to give the dog's head a gentle pat. "We have to keep going, Dad needs us." With the dog at her heels, Lily made her way towards the shack, her steps cautious and deliberate. As she drew closer, she could see that the structure was in a state of disrepair, the weathered boards creaking ominously in the wind. Steeling her nerves, Lily reached for the door handle, pausing for a moment before slowly pushing it open. The door swung inward with a protesting groan, and Lily peered inside, her eyes straining to adjust to the dim light. What she saw made her heart skip a beat. Huddled in the corner, his wrists and ankles bound, was a young man, scarred, emaciated, and barely conscious. Lily felt a surge of horror and pity as she took in his condition, her mind racing to comprehend the implications. "Dad," she called out, her voice trembling. "Dad, is that you?" The young man stirred at the sound of her voice, his eyes slowly opening. Lily felt a wave of relief wash over her as she recognized her father's familiar features, though they were gaunt and weathered by the ordeal he had endured. "Lily?" Ethan croaked, his voice barely audible. How did you find me?" Tears welling in her eyes, Lily rushed to her father's side, her fingers fumbling with the ropes that bound his wrists. "I followed the balloon, Dad. I had to find you to save you." Ethan let out a weak, shaky laugh. You always were the brave one." He winced as Lily freed his hands, his muscles protesting after being confined for so long. Lily's gaze darted around the shack, and she spotted a discarded length of metal pipe, likely used as a weapon by their captor. Gripping it tightly, she turned to the dog, her expression resolute. "Stay with them, boy. I'm gonna see if I can find a way to get us out of here." The dog let out a soft whine, his eyes conveying a mix of concern and understanding. Lily knew she was taking a risk, but she couldn't stand by and do nothing, not when her father's life was at stake. With a deep breath, Lily pushed open the door and stepped out into the oppressive heat of the island, her grip on the pipe tightening as she prepared to confront whatever horrors might be waiting for her. Chapter 20. A Bittersweet Reunion. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped out into the blinding sunlight, the metal pipe gripped tightly in her small hands. Her gaze swept the barren landscape, searching for any sign of their captor, but the island seemed eerily still and quiet. Carefully, Lily began to make her way around the shack, her eyes peeled for a means of escape. She knew that time was of the essence. Her father was in desperate need of medical attention, and she couldn't bear the thought of him suffering a moment longer. As she rounded the corner, Lily froze, her breath catching in her throat. There, standing silhouetted against the glare of the sun, was a figure she recognized all too well. "Mr. Gradwell," Lily breathed, her grip on the pipe tightening. The older man turned, his expression a mixture of surprise and resignation. "Lily, I didn't expect you to follow me here." Lily held her ground, her eyes narrowing. "Where's the person who did this?" she demanded, her voice surprisingly steady. "The one who took my dad and the other child all those years ago?" Mr. Gradwell let out a weary sigh, his shoulders slumping. "He's gone, Lily. I couldn't stop him." The older man's gaze shifted, and Lily followed his line of sight, her breath catching in her throat. There, partially obscured by the glare of the sun, stood a lone figure, a young man, his features gaunt and weathered, yet still familiar. "Dad?" Lily breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. Ethan emerged from the shadows, his expression a mix of relief and sorrow. "Lily, I'm so sorry you had to see this." Lily felt a wave of emotion wash over her, and she rushed to her father's side, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dad, what happened? Who did this to you?" Ethan reached out, pulling Lily into a tight embrace. "It's a long story, Lily, one I wish you never had to hear." Mr. Gradwell cleared his throat, his voice heavy with regret. I witnessed it all years ago, the kidnapping, the escape. I've been searching ever since, trying to find a way to make things right." Lily pulled back, her brow furrowed in confusion. "But why? Why did you never go to the police?" Mr. Gradwell's gaze shifted, his eyes haunted. "I was afraid, Lily, afraid of what might happen, of the consequences. I couldn't bear the thought of being responsible for more pain." Ethan reached out, placing a hand on the older man's shoulder. "Mr. Gradwell, you may have made some mistakes, but you're not the one who did this. You've been carrying this burden for far too long." Mr. Gradwell nodded, his expression softening. "I know that now, and I'm ready to make things right, to help bring the true culprit to justice." As the three of them stood there, united in their shared trauma and determination, Lily couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet resolution. The journey had been harrowing, the secrets dark and deeply unsettling, but in the end, they had found a way to confront the darkness and emerge, if not unscathed, then at least with a glimmer of hope. Lily knew that the road ahead would not be an easy one, that the scars of this ordeal would linger long into the future. But as she looked into the faces of her father and Mr. Gradwell, she saw a newfound resolve, a determination to overcome the past and reclaim their lives. And in that moment, Lily knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united by an unexpected alliance forged in the crucible of their shared suffering. The end.